Hello. Today I would like to talk about discrimination. To start off, I'm gonna give you the definitions. Many of you, of course, have come across the usual meaning of the word discrimination, where there is a disadvantaged group, and the group which is discriminated against is treated unfairly. Okay, so you can have discrimination based on ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, and so forth. So that's one thing. Okay, but there is also another meaning of the word discrimination, and that's the usual meaning, in fact, in science, and it's much more benign. And by discrimination, we mean predictive power. We mean the ability to classify instances of certain phenomena. So like the ability of a theory to find proper causes for a certain phenomena and be able to make predictions. Discrimination in the scientific sense is about using the data on certain units of observation in order to predict as good as possible. And so you may think that it's just like completely distinct phenomena that just happen to be called discrimination, but there is nothing in common between them. That's actually not true, because there is a certain type of discrimination in the scientific sense that pertains to people. Okay, sometimes we do formulate theories and do formulate predictions regarding people. And just to give you some practical examples, you could have a prediction problem such as whom to hire. Should I hire these persons or those persons? Should I promote or demote someone? Should I give a loan or refuse to give a loan? Or in the case of policing, you can think of predicting if someone is a terrorist threat or not. And all these questions are predictive problems. Okay, so in a way, it is about discrimination in the scientific sense. And on the other hand, it also pertains to certain people, in particular certain groups of people, who are treated differently than others based on past data. So what I'm talking really about is statistical discrimination. And statistical discrimination, it's a situation where you have a number of individuals. Each of them has a number of characteristics, and you would like to make best possible predictions on their actions. Okay, so for example, if I'm at an insurance company, I would like to predict whom of these drivers is going to have an accident, okay, in the future. So we cannot have perfect foresight, we cannot be sure what will happen. We only can use the past data, the history of these people, and some of their general characteristics, and use statistical methods to discriminate, okay, to have a prediction whether some of them is going to cause an accident or not. And so statistical discrimination in this sense is kind of accepted and universally used. For example, in, again, car insurance companies, it's quite often that you are discriminated against if you're young. So for example, the amount you have to pay for the insurance of your car is higher if you're under 25 years of age. And you cannot just say, okay, I mean, I'm 22, but I'm a perfectly responsible person, so it's unfair. I mean, it is what it is. It's statistical discrimination. You can't do anything about this. On the other hand, though, there are some important characteristics upon which you are legally forbidden to discriminate. So there are some sensitive variables. Again, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, things like that. And if you use these characteristics, you would improve your predictions. because indeed statistically there are significant differences between ethnicities, genders, age groups, and so on. And so if you use this data, you could statistically discriminate and improve your performance in terms of prediction. But you're not legally allowed to use these characteristics in your decision making, which paradoxically, if you just take this narrative as a given, paradoxically is good. Okay, why is it good? Here, my take on this is that it's actually good because of who we are. So we are a social species. We have a tribal instinct, and we live in groups, and so we kind of organize our thinking and organize our identity in a sequence of concentric circles around oneself. So you have the inner circle of your close family, then you have the more broader circle of your friends and distant family. Then you can also identify with your community, with your nation, with your ethnic group, and so on. So it's a sequence of concentric circles, including more and more people within each next circle, and that builds your identity. And so you can feel that you belong to a certain group, but also that you do not belong to some other group. And we are basically all tribal in the sense that we have this innate feeling that our group is superior to the out group. And this is the main reason why I think that forbidding using certain characteristics for statistical discrimination is actually good. Because statistical discrimination is easily hijacked and used as a tool to incite hate against outgroups, to strengthen your identity within your in-group, basically undermine social cohesion, and in such a situation, the loss in predictive power because of forbidding a few characteristics in decision making is more than compensated by the gain following from the fact that you stop all these destructive processes. But it's not just about tribalism. It's also about self-reinforcing vicious circles. If a group is discriminated against, then their life conditions are worse, and some of the negative outcomes are perpetuated. And they would have been perfectly avoided if the group has not been discriminated against in the first place. Bad actions breed bad actions, and you have a vicious circle. And you can get away of this circle by banning statistical discrimination. And finally, another important factor is that in many situations we refuse to admit that we don't know how a certain part of reality works. And we would tend to agree with a certain dogma, with a certain pseudo-theory, just following the feeling that it's better to have a bad theory than no theory, which is, of course, false if the bad theory does not represent the true world. People have characteristics, and some of those characteristics can be easily seen. For example, race and gender, these are very obvious to be seen at the first glance. Sometimes you also have religious denominations that can easily be recognized by the way, for example, they dress. And these features, which are easiest to be seen, are also the ones which are most likely to create fictions, to give rise to fictions which can widely spread and later even solidify as dogma and cement a certain in-group. And that is also a big loss to the humankind as a whole. So overall, I think prohibiting statistical discrimination based on certain sensitive variables is a good idea because it prevents the buildup of our tribalism, it prevents the buildup of vicious circles and creation of dogmas. By the way, let me also remark on some of the new artificial intelligence algorithms that have been created recently and used, for example, in hiring decisions. There was a highly publicized case where a company hired an artificial intelligence algorithm to make decisions about their persons who they would like to hire. And this algorithm was explicitly prohibited to base decisions on characteristics like gender, race, ethnicity, and so on. But nevertheless, it turned out that the algorithm did discriminate, for example, against women, even though it could not look at the variable gender. How this happened? Well, this algorithm circumvented the restriction by scanning CVs, looking for something like girls something or women's something, like, for example, women's organization for something, or girls scouts or whatever. So if someone had something like this in the CV, it indicates it's most likely a woman, and that was used to discriminate against. Now, why on earth would this AI algorithm be so bigoted? Okay? Why would it like to discriminate against women? Of course, it wanted not to discriminate, but it wanted predictive power. It was all about predictive power. And if you look at the data we have, it's data from the past. And of course, past data includes past biases. So if in the history we had discrimination against women, against black people, and so on, then these patterns of discrimination are seen in the data. And if you would like to maximize predictive power based on this past data set, you would like to continue this discrimination because you should expect this because that was in the past data. It's hard to fight against biases that have been present for basically the whole history. To sum this argument up, I would like to repeat that there are two meanings of the word discrimination, and the word discrimination refers to either statistical discrimination or predictive power, and that's a characteristic of a good theory. And on the other hand, discrimination can be also about unfair treatment of certain disadvantaged group, and discrimination in this sense reflects biases rather than our pursuit of truth. And therefore, in my perspective, it is impossible and it doesn't really make sense to prohibit all sorts of statistical discrimination. So there still need to be variables on which you should be able to predict. Okay, you cannot just drop all prediction. The world cannot operate. The economy, the society needs to be able to make predictions. So we cannot ban all statistical discrimination. But on the other hand, I think it is very good to fight against biases. And it's very good to treat everyone fairly. And how would you like to treat everyone fairly? Well, one way is to draw a line somewhere and say that, okay, these characteristics can be used for predictions, but there is this sensitive group of characteristics which must not be used for any sort of predictions. So you should not predict if a person is going to, let's say, repay the loan or not, or commit crime or not, based on, let's say, gender, race, ethnicity. Okay, these are the forbidden characteristics. And the question where to point the threshold, okay, which characteristics are sufficiently sensitive and which are not, that's really a matter of public discussion. So people on the right wing would say that basically you shouldn't have any sensitive characteristics. I mean, we are all equal, so you can statistically discriminate based on all characteristics. On the other hand, you could have the left-wing people who would say that, okay, I mean, you should not discriminate for sure on race, gender, and so on, but let's think about what else can be used as unfair discrimination. And I already gave you one example, which in fact is already problematic. I mean, age. Probably you heard about ageism, right? Which is discrimination, unfair treatment based on age. I don't know, maybe one day we will agree that, charging more for car insurance from young people is unfair treatment of young people. Why should they pay more just because, some other people who also happen to be in their age behave irresponsibly if they themselves are perfectly responsible? So you see, it's a fine question. It's not like, it's easy to answer like the right-wing people will say, okay, all variables are fine to be used in prediction and there is nothing sensitive. And if you think there is anything sensitive, you're a snowflake. Okay, it's not really what I believe. On the other hand, you can also, imagine the extreme left-wing point of view, which would look for sensitive characteristics everywhere, and would say you should not make any predictions, in fact, because that is statistical, and that does not pertain to the person who is unique, and everyone is unique. The problem with this, though, is, of course, we don't have perfect foresight. So, I mean, we cannot see into the future, and we cannot say perfectly anything about actions of a certain person. And so, I guess we need to draw the line somewhere.